This coronavirus crisis has shown us that China has huge influence over the World Health Organization. Now, the WHO's last boss was in fact Chinese, and the current one has praised Chinese dictator Xi Jinping to the skies for his handling of the crisis, never mind how China first suppressed information.
The other important element is the political commitment and your personal leadership.
Now, it gets worse. The World Health Organization has 9 Goodwill Ambassadors, and they include Peng Liyuan, who the organisation describes as a singer and an actress in China's army, a major general. What it does not add is that Peng is also the wife of the Chinese dictator. Another one of the 9 Goodwill Ambassadors is James Chau, who is British-born, but actually anchors the main evening news on China's state-owned China Central Television. And while he wouldn't dream of attacking China's dictator, Xi Jinping, or his wife, he does, of course, attack the United States.
At its core, and I think what the professor there indicated, is an institutional, a systemic, a structural racism in the healthcare system and in access to public services over there. You ask a black man to go out there with a mask in a country with a well-documented history of police violence. They want to keep themselves safe, but in fact, you're putting them in danger by asking them to go out with a mask in the first place.
Joining me is the man who pointed all this out, Hillel Neuer, head of the Geneva-based lobby group UN Watch, which keeps a sceptical eye on the United Nations. Hillel, it's great to catch up with you again. Hey, is there any problem, in your view, with the World Health Organization appointing 2 such prominent apologists for China, including the dictator's own wife, as a Goodwill Ambassador?
I think there are any number of problems, and I'll just mention 2. First thing is, this shows a culture of corruption at the World Health Organization. Look, in 2003, China got slammed, and it was trying to hide SARS outbreak, and it got slammed by the then Director-General Margaret of the WHO. That's in 2003. A few years later, 2006, China's candidate Margaret Chen suddenly takes over the World Health Organization. So now China's candidate, they're very proud that they put her in there. And then a couple years later, this Chinese candidate, Margaret Chen, who's now heading the WHO, suddenly names wife of the Chinese dictator as a Goodwill Ambassador. And then she names this Chinese TV propagandist, James Chau, as a Goodwill Ambassador. We see that when the current chief came in a couple years ago, the first thing he did, and Tedros, he comes from Ethiopia, the first thing he did was name his neighbor and friend, the dictator now departed, Mugabe of Zimbabwe, as a Goodwill Ambassador. So it shows there's a culture of corruption that the dictatorships managed to, get these spots in there. And that's the first problem. The second problem, of course, is what they're doing with these positions. James Chau, to name one of them, he uses his WHO, his UN title, all the time. It's his main title, which is odd. He's a paid Chinese TV so-called journalist, yet his main title that he uses is a WHO UN Goodwill Ambassador, and he's been using it in the past 5 months, nonstop, Andrew, nonstop, on Twitter, YouTube, across social media, to put in serious propaganda for China, painting it as heroic. You showed one clip, but there's dozens more, as you know, painting China as heroic, and not a word of criticism for the fact that they harassed whistleblowers, made people disappear who dared to criticize China's handling of the pandemic. Anyone who spoke out about the pandemic, who tried to sound the alarm, was muzzled, was disappeared, was arrested, was shut down. And this guy, James Chau, who's supposed to represent the World Health Organization, couldn't find a single word to say about this, even though he's been talking about the subject for 5 months.
You're quite right. I looked up his Twitter feed, and he described himself as the World Health Organization Goodwill Ambassador. It doesn't say that it's actually a paid flunky of the Chinese dictatorship, but there you go. Now, let me play the devil's advocate, though, Hillel, because both of us are very sceptical, so I'm just going to, naively ask you this question. Both James Chau and Xi Jinping's wife, the Major General, have big followings on social media, so they would reach a lot of Chinese people. Now, isn't this a way that the World Health Organization can get out its message, and do some good in the world?
I think for the wife of the Chinese president, the dictator, perhaps an argument could be made that the World Health Organization is, co-opting her to spread the message of world health. Of course, we would have to ask whether perhaps the opposite has happened, whether in fact China has succeeded in co-opting the World Health Organization. And based on what we've seen, the repeated and lavish praise of the World Health Organization for China's so-called transparency and leadership in fighting the pandemic, when in fact they were shutting down anyone who tried to sound the alarm, when they were pressuring countries like Australia. I was actually in Australia when I saw you last, at the time when this was beginning, and they were trying to pressure Australia not to bar flights incoming from China, as they were doing in many other countries. So this is what China was doing. And so it seems that China, in fact, she's co-opted the World Health Organization. But if we come to James Chau, what's interesting about him is, I could see the logic for having someone who's speaking in Chinese to reach 1 billion people and spread the message, but he actually speaks in English. James Chau is a British-born Cambridge graduate who sold his soul to the Chinese Communist Party. We don't know why he did it, but that's what he's done. And he's speaking in English. Once you talk about people speaking in English, there are thousands of personalities who have much larger followings and who are not propagandists, who could reach large English-speaking audiences way above James Chau.
Hillel, Neuer, that is a very good point, very good point. And I just think we really have to look very carefully at what on earth has happened with the World Health Organization. No, they're very good officials down below the food chain, but at the very top, something stinks to high heaven. Thank you so much for all your work.
Australia has shown leadership. Australia has shown leadership in demanding it. And from here in Geneva, I want to thank Australia for showing leadership on this issue.